For 2,000 years, humanity has focused on the historical and theological accuracy of the Christ story, a debate now splitting its foundation. By treating the narrative as a record of the past, we often overlook the psychological mechanism at its core. Modern society illustrates the cost of this oversight. We chase power and distraction, yet the sense of emptiness grows. This crisis of meaning stems from a sharp division we created between the mind and the spirit. The image of Christ has endured because it functions as a mirror to this condition. It reflects the internal struggle of every human soul, offering a resolution that historical facts alone cannot provide. The psychoanalyst Carl Jung approached Christ as a timeless symbol living within the human psyche. Jung identified this as an archetype, an innate, inherited pattern in the mind. In this framework, the Christ figure represents the psyche's inherent drive toward wholeness, a path every individual is wired to follow. When ancient manuscripts claim the kingdom of God is within you, they point towards an internal state of consciousness. This is a technical description of a human capacity, rather than a reference to a physical place. We can trace this narrative as a sequence of internal shifts. By reframing the gospel from external history into a psychological map, we find a specific process for dismantling the ego. The story begins with a birth in a manger, surrounded by animals. These animals symbolize our instincts and primal drives, the earthy, instinctual components of human nature. Awareness emerges first in these humble, unconscious parts of the psyche. New consciousness enters through the shadows of the mind, rather than the polished halls of the intellect. This new awareness immediately faces a threat in King Herod. Herod represents the ego, the part of the self that fears any change that might end its control. You hear Herod's voice in your own life as the internal resistance to change. It is the part of you that demands you stay safe and keep your current identity intact at all costs. Any genuine step toward transformation triggers the psyche's deepest defense mechanism. The ego interprets a shift in consciousness as a threat to its existence. The baptism in the Jordan River represents an immersion into the unconscious. To move forward, the individual must confront the buried memories and unhealed wounds that lie beneath the surface of daily life. Emerging from the water marks the realization of the observer. You recognize that you are the awareness behind your thoughts, separate from the storm of your emotions. The subsequent 40 days in the desert pit the individual against the devil, the internal voice of the ego offering shortcuts to power and validation once the world's distractions are gone. This phase of the map teaches that inner strength comes from the surrender of control. True power is found in the rejection of the ego's false promises. The crucifixion is the climax of this map, intersecting temporal human life and eternal awareness. This represents the painful dissolution of the false self built on pride and fear. To enter a new state, the old identity must break apart. This liberation occurs every time we let go of a rigid identity. The death of the old self provides the space for a wider awareness to take its place. The resurrection signifies the rebirth of awareness. It is the realization of a self that remains constant, even as the forms of our lives change and die. Jung used the term individuation to describe this state, the moment an individual becomes whole by integrating their light and shadow into a unified presence. This context redefines the miracles as metaphors for inner alchemy. Healing the blind represents the recovery of inner sight. Calming the storm represents the mastery over emotional chaos. These stories suggest that the potential for such transformation is hidden within every person. The power displayed in the narrative is a mirror of our own psychological capacity. We can view sin as a state of forgetfulness, the exact moment an individual falls asleep to their own divine nature and becomes lost in the ego's illusions. Taking up your cross is a directive to face suffering consciously. When pain is no longer resisted, it functions as an initiation, transforming from a weight into a source of light. Salvation manifests as awakening in the present moment. Each time you choose presence over reaction, you participate in the resurrection described in the ancient map.